Welcome. I'm Patricia Munro, member of the Network Leadership Team. I'm delighted to welcome you to our continuing series of executive briefings. Today, we're going to talk about executive mentoring for complexity. In the next 30 minutes, we'll explore how leaders can move beyond outdated playbooks, not by working harder, but by seeing differently. You know, the pressures on leaders today are immense. Constant disruption, blurred boundaries, and legacy systems that no longer serve. And here's the central challenge. You can't find your way out of a labyrinth by running faster. What you need is a new vantage point, one that reveals the deeper system behind all the noise. Today, we'll show you that that vantage point can be unlocked through a very specific kind of executive mentoring, one that is rooted in the insights of networks and focused on real-world leadership effectiveness. Let's get an overview of what we're going to talk about today. The labyrinth that this guy is finding himself in, why traditional mentoring can't help him so well, the power of the network lens, and why it is different than everything else. What makes it different from every other kind of executive mentoring what we're offering, and what do leaders get out of it, and of course the formats that we offer. Write your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the executive session. But first, I want to hand it over to Jeffrey Beeson, who's a strategist who's worked for Bain and McKinsey, a systems thinker, a culture shaper, and a network leadership pioneer. He's author of the book Network Leadership, which was published by Cambridge University Press this year. And he'll reframe the challenges which leaders are facing today. Jeff?
Thank you, Patricia. And I really love that metaphor of the labyrinth. And when you're in that labyrinth and all you see is the walls and feel constrained and you have no feeling how you're going to get out. But if you just elevate just a little bit and see the whole labyrinth, then it becomes easy, clear. And that's what I'm going to try to present to you today in terms of how executive mentoring can help leaders to have a much better view of what they need to do, and what needs to happen. But let's be honest. Most executive mentoring today still runs on 20th century logic. It assumes that what leaders need is more content, another model, or perhaps another framework, or another checklist. But in today's world, information is not the problem. Navigation is the issue. Well, because today's leaders, what they're facing is very different from what they've faced in the past. They're dealing with complexity without having a map. It's new terrain. So, for instance, just a few years ago, there was a radical shift in the way work was carried out, with a large number of employees working from home, working remote. And then now a whole set of different types of hybrid structures have emerged in the way that people collaborate together. And there was no roadmap for that. No precedent for this happening. So you had to go actually navigate it without all of that previous information. And the other thing that leaders are facing today is change without warning. Competitors coming out of the woodwork out of nowhere, some of them hardly existing on more than a few years, but nevertheless disrupting industries. So take, for instance, the example of Encyclopedia Britannica, which was the source for information for over 250 years. And then in almost no time whatsoever, an upstart called Wikipedia completely eclipsed them. And then finally, the things are moving so fast and there's so much data that it's hard to see through the fog. And sometimes the data contradicts itself, but you still need to take action. Time is short. You need to make decisions. And one thing that leaders have been experiencing recently is this whole issue of tariffs. How high? When do they come into effect? What do I do? What countries do I source from? And this is and decisions are demanded. And so these are the kinds of issues that are arising that leaders haven't had to deal with before. And so, in this context, mentoring needs to do a lot more than just provide advice. It actually needs to make that shift in perspective possible that we talked about when we talked about the labyrinth, and to uncover the invisible system that is beneath the surface. Because here's what we've learned. What's blocking progress isn't usually a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of visibility into how things really work. And that's why we've developed a form of executive mentoring that's fundamentally different. How is it different? Well, first and foremost, it's grounded in network science. And network science is the new kid on the block. It was only recognized as a separate area of research in 2005. But in those 20 years since that happened, network science has been transforming our world in many different ways. Of course, it's behind the algorithms on our social media, and that has a clear direct impact on our lives. But it has revolutionized the way that we manage viral infections. It came into its own during the pandemic. It has changed the way we're doing urban planning. It is changing the way that we understand our brain. All of these things have been shifting dramatically. And now it's getting to the point where it's beginning to change the world of business in the sense that organizations, which are networks, which we'll come back to in more detail, are subject to the laws of networks. And this is the grounding that we have for mentoring to help people see what is going on. Secondly, it's customized to a leader's unique context. Every network is different, even though industries may be the same, and you have to look at the exact situation that is happening to understand the dynamics of that network. And finally, we don't just give generic advice. We really focus on how and where to act and try to pinpoint the places in the network where the most impact, the most leverage can happen. Let's take a look at what that actually means. And here's the really exciting breakthrough. Network science has come to the conclusion that all complex systems, and I repeat that, all complex systems, are structured around the pattern of networks. And by the way, all of living forms, anything that's alive, is a complex system. And so it turns out that organizations are also complex systems, and therefore also structured around network patterns. To put it another way, an organization is a network. And we'll even go one further. It is a living network. It's not a hierarchy, not just a hierarchy, not just a chart, but it's a complex system of relationships, flows, and influence. And that is where the power lies. That is where we can gain that new perspective. So when you look at your organization as a network, you begin to see many different things. First of all, you actually see where decisions are made and by whom. And sometimes that's really surprising and unexpected. You can see where energy is flowing or gets stuck. In other words, where the motivation is, where the energy, where things are moving forward, and where there is resistance. And these are really important aspects of any leader's function. The whole issue of trust. Networks function best when information flows. And information flows, just like water, where the channels are open. Those channels are open when there's trust. And so this is a tremendously important aspect of what a leader needs to look at. And then finally, the connections. Networks are composed of key connections, and some of them really help to accelerate progress by creating the right connection between functions, for instance, can open up doors that otherwise would remain closed. But then there are also connections which block the flow of information. And knowing the difference and knowing where those connections are make all the difference in how do you act, what do you do. This is not theory. This is grounded in network data and can be shown as real maps of how people collaborate, share information, and influence one another. And here's the most powerful part. When leaders see these hidden dynamics, they make better decisions faster with more impact. I'll give you a couple of examples of cases that we've experienced. So we worked with a newly appointed CEO who began to realize shortly after entering into the office that cross-functional decisions were actually being delayed, we're going slow, we're not advancing. And it turned out that that was not because there was resistance to the top management, but interestingly enough, because two trusted mid-level influencers in the network had been sidelined. They had been assigned other areas and were taken out of the flow of the work. And when the CEO reconnected them, brought them back into the decision-making process, things began moving again. So knowing how and what is connected or disconnected can have very quick results with very little effort. A second case was a transformation situation where the head of the transformation initiative that was having a difficult time getting two regions to cooperate and collaborate with each other, despite having all the authority needed to make things move. And it turned out that what was required was someone who had the relationships in both regions, what we call a sort of informal connector, a bridging agent in network speak. And by bringing that network person, that bridging person into the core team, this whole transformation process began to gain traction. Again, one simple move, tremendous impact. And this is the kind of insight we bring into executive mentoring. We don't just ask, what should you do? We ask, where is the system ready to shift? And how can you catalyze it? So let me hand it back to Patricia, who will discuss a little bit further how this mentoring is different.
Thanks, Jeff. What makes it different? You can see this from this image that there's a network always present. And what we do is that we integrate individual leadership learning and capacities learning with the insights of network science, which has to do with their connections, with their teams, and throughout the entire organization and ecosystem, but also the kinds of insights that will improve the impact of their business. So it's not conversations that are vague or checking in your goals. It's a focused, high impact engagement. And it's built around core network principles. Let me talk a little bit about these and make them a little bit more tangible for you. Visualizing the system. When you use a network analysis, it reveals how information, trust, and influence flow throughout your context of your business and your business ecosystem. And as we spoke about earlier, it provides a new vantage point. It's not your opinion or anyone's opinion, but it's an insight that is grounded in data. It also targets leverage points for impact. So instead of spreading your leadership thin, this kind of work identifies where it will make the biggest difference for them when they go in a certain point. So who do they have to engage with? What connections need to be repaired or strengthened? And where to step back? It also strengthens network leadership capacities. So we're talking about leaders who have the ability to navigate complex systems. This is an issue that's happened ever since the pandemic, and it's gotten rapidly more evident every day. And these leaders need to sense emerging patterns. They need to, as a result, make timely interventions and not wait too long before the competition has already beat them to it. And they need to mobilize others in their teams, in their organization, and in the business ecosystems through trust and clarity. And of course, focus, reflection, and action is key for any leader. And our sessions combine guided reflection with practical next steps. So it helps any leader with great precision to be able to deal with ambiguity. Now, this mentoring works because of the synergy of three components: the leaders who are part of the mentoring system or project, the system, which is the organization itself, and again, its business ecosystem, whether it's in a country or worldwide, and the moment of change. Now we've had a lot of those. So how do you deal with all these kinds of things? And why does mentoring like this make a difference? Why? Because when all of these three items line up, transformation becomes possible not by force or dictatum, but by the synergy between the three components, which is flow. So Jeff is going to tell you what leaders can gain from this approach, which is quite a lot. Jeff?
Oh, thank you, Patricia. And yes, what do leaders stand to gain by looking at their organizations in this way and looking at ways of intervening from a network perspective? Well, one of the first things that is very evident is that they gain clarity. Most problems today are very complex. There's a lot of things happening, and it's hard to see the forest from the trees. But by using the network analysis, by looking at organizations from this perspective, leaders will begin to be able to notice patterns. It may not be a full picture, but it will allow them to act with confidence, even when the full picture isn't totally clear. Secondly, it will really help them to focus on connections, which are the lifeblood of a network, and to understand where these connections can really assist. That it'll pinpoint the hidden influencers, the structural gaps in the organization, and provide information on ways to deal with those and to work with those issues and not have them work against you. And then finally, it gives a certain amount of agility, ability to pivot. And as we know, things are changing and things are coming at leaders all the time. And the ability to pivot is really important. And they can do that because they know the way that the system is responding. By reading the signals from the network, they can shift and respond to what is happening in real time. And by the way, this isn't just for CEOs. We've worked with senior leaders who are navigating transformation, also with division heads that are caught between a global strategy and an attempt to implement and execute that locally, and also with high potential talents who are beginning to really take on a lot more responsibility. And no matter who we work with, they describe the same shift for them. They typically tell us, I now see the system and I know where to act. That's the difference this kind of mentoring makes. Let me return it back to you, Patricia, and lead us through the kind of formats that we offer in terms of executive mentoring.
So how does this actually work in an organization like yours? We offer executive mentoring in three formats: a one-on-one mentoring journey, which is structured around 4 to 6 sessions over a period of 2 or 3 months. And these are tailored to your leadership context of your organization. Every session is grounded in real business challenges and supported by network insights. Now, for those leaders who want a deeper, sharper view of organizational dynamics throughout your organization, System mapping and strategic guidance is another way of doing executive mentoring. Here we combine mentoring with a full network analysis, either of a division, it can also be the whole company. And it provides you with both a map and the membership to understand the map. And then when you understand the map, to say, oh, these are the strategic initiatives I and my company need to get going, so we can have impact for our business. And last but not least, and probably very important, one is that sometimes it's not just one leader, but a team that needs to shift how it operates. We offer facilitated mentoring for leadership teams who are navigating complexity together. And what makes this work is the combination of the precision of the way that we approach executive mentoring as an individual leadership development, and the precision of the network and insights that we gain from mapping, and also the implications of that mapping for your company. And of course, it also reflects in the collaboration that we have with you as a partners in our mix of these two things. So we don't just give advice. And as we've said from the very beginning, we co-navigate the system with you, confidentially, clearly, and with deep respect for your business reality. We hope today's session has sparked something useful for you and your business. Not just a new idea, but a new way of seeing your leadership role in complex systems from a network perspective. Thanks for joining us. We believe that leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about knowing how to read the system and move at the right moment in the right way. As you can see, we are an enabling company. So we offer a variety of solutions that create results. Today we talked about executive mentoring, but we do many other things. From courses, both online and offline, for network labs, whether it be about innovation or about talent management. We have zero distance probes, which is about zero distance to the customer and how you can get closer to a customer like the Gen Zs to be able to shape your business, to be able to fulfill their expectations for your business. We have a variety of tools that are network-based that enable you to have very specific insights, many of which are developed by us. And last but not least, enabling services these are customized enabling services for companies that want to consider the path of becoming a network organization. If you're interested in learning more, and I hope you are, you can book a one-to-one conversation with Jeffrey to explore how this kind of executive mentoring approach could look for your organization. Or you can go to our website, www.networkleadership.au, and then fill out a contact form so that we can be in connection with each other. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to keeping the conversation going.